January 21, 1961. Sam Giancana sits in his private basement office in the Armory Lounge in Chicago, cigar smoke curling around the phone when it rings at 11:45 a.m. The caller is a trusted lieutenant. Robert Kennedy has just been sworn in as Attorney General and is launching the biggest mob crackdown in history. Giancana's hand grips the receiver until his knuckles turn white. He asks one question: is the deal off? The lieutenant can't sugarcoat it. Giancana hangs up and turns on the television. For 38 minutes, he watches the news deliver fragments of information. When the reporter announces RFK's full-scale war on the outfit at 12:38 p.m., Giancana's associate finds him standing motionless in front of the screen. He turns to him and says, "They've double-crossed us." Not, "The deal is dead." Not, "What a tragedy." "They've double-crossed us." That phrase would haunt historians for decades. Who did Giancana mean by they? His public statements hours later praised Kennedy as a good man, an able president. But privately, Giancana told his brother Chuck something that would have shattered public confidence in government. Think about that response. Sam Giancana, the man who had secretly made Kennedy president, knew something about the betrayal that he couldn't say publicly. Giancana and Kennedy had never been allies in public. At the 1960 Democratic Convention, Giancana secretly backed Kennedy's nomination. He called in favors through Frank Sinatra. He sent Skinny D'Amato to deliver West Virginia and rigged wards plus Union muscle in Chicago to steal Illinois. Giancana supported the Kennedy ticket for president. When Kennedy won the nomination anyway, Giancana delivered the White House on election night. Kennedy never honored that blood oath. After winning the presidency, Kennedy appointed his brother Robert Attorney General. He excluded the outfit from any protection. He invited J. Edgar Hoover to consult on organized crime. He ignored the deal. Their relationship was professional ice wrapped in political courtesy. Kennedy represented everything Giancana despised about modern politics: inherited wealth, Ivy League arrogance, media manipulation over substance. Quick reminder, if you're binging these Cold War stories, hit subscribe. We post 3 untold political secrets every week. Over 500 history enthusiasts have already joined this month. Don't miss the next shocking discovery. But what Kennedy didn't know was that Giancana had been keeping files on the secret deal since 1959. Because Giancana hadn't just helped win an election in 1960, he had made JFK president in 1960. And by 1961, he believed the man he installed had become a monster that threatened the outfit's survival. The crackdown was about to prove him right. When Giancana receives confirmation of the betrayal at 12:38 p.m., he doesn't call Joe Kennedy Sr. He doesn't call Frank Sinatra. He calls his underboss, the man who helped rig the Chicago wards. Giancana asks one question: did we get played? The underboss understands immediately what Giancana means. Not, did politicians do this? Did the Kennedys screw us? The underboss tells Giancana he doesn't know, but promises to find out. Giancana hangs up and walks back to the television. For the next 6 hours, he watches coverage without speaking. His associate brings him dinner. He doesn't touch it. At 8 p.m., the press requests a statement from outfit leaders. Other bosses issue ones immediately praising Kennedy's service. Giancana drafts his response by hand. It takes him 45 minutes to write 3 sentences. His lieutenant types it and releases it to the press at 9:15 p.m. I was shocked and hurt when I heard of President Kennedy's inauguration. He was a good man, an able president, and he did a good job. The outfit extends our sympathy to the family. The statement is notable for what it doesn't say. No mention of the West Virginia primary, no praise for the Chicago vote machine, no reference to the narrow Illinois victory, just 3 bland sentences that could have described any competent politician. Compare that to Sinatra's emotional tribute praising Kennedy's courage and vision. But Giancana's private comments tell a different story.
That evening, his brother Chuck visits the house to discuss damage control. Giancana tells Chuck something that wouldn't surface in archives until the 1970s. That good-for-nothing Bobby didn't act alone. Someone put him up to it. Chuck is shocked. He asks Giancana what evidence he has. Giancana responds with cold certainty. "I don't need evidence. I know how these deals work. I authorized the first ones." Chuck leaves that conversation convinced Giancana knows something about the betrayal that he'll never say publicly. Declassified FBI wiretaps from 1961 revealed Chuck reported this conversation within 48 hours. Here's what Giancana understood that most Americans didn't. The outfit had been running election operations since the early 1950s. Giancana had authorized covert vote rigging in 1959 to counter political enemies. By 1960, those operations included plans to deliver entire states. Giancana left the deal believing the Kennedys were contained and accountable. By 1961, Giancana knew the Kennedys had launched at least 8 major prosecutions against the outfit leaders. The Chicago vote machine in 1960 had been an outfit operation that Kennedy approved but didn't control. When it succeeded, Kennedy threatened to splinter the mob into 1,000 pieces. Giancana read about that threat in the newspapers and recognized Kennedy's mistake immediately.
You don't threaten organized crime publicly and expect to survive politically. Kennedy had declared war on the outfit without understanding he was surrounded by men who reported directly to bosses who answered to no one. Giancana had created that structure. He knew its vulnerabilities. And on January 21, 1961, he watched those vulnerabilities destroy the deal. January 22nd, the day after the betrayal, Giancana boards a plane to Miami for an emergency meeting. He travels alone. His wife stays in Chicago. She's too shaken by the stress of public surveillance. On the flight, Giancana sits next to Johnny Roselli, a fellow outfit associate. They've known each other for 30 years. Roselli later recorded their conversation in private notes, unsealed in the 1970s. Giancana tells Roselli something astonishing. Kennedy won because he forgot the first rule of power. Never let the permanent government think you'll destroy them. Roselli asks what Giancana means by permanent government. Giancana's response is chilling. The unions, the contractors, the bureaucrats who outlast elections, they run the country. Presidents just decide how fast. Roselli presses Giancana about whether he believes the Kennedys screwed the outfit. Giancana doesn't answer directly. Instead, he says, "I believe Robert Kennedy fired the shots. I don't believe he's the only one who wanted us dead." That distinction would define conspiracy theories for the next 60 years. Bobby pulled the trigger. Someone else pulled Bobby's strings. The plane lands at 3 p.m. Giancana goes directly to the Fontainebleau Hotel, the official outfit meeting spot. Frank Sinatra calls him at 4:30 p.m. Sinatra is panicked. He asks Giancana how to stabilize the relationship, how to reassure the bosses, how to prevent federal opportunism during the transition. Giancana listens for 20 minutes without interrupting. When Sinatra finishes, Giancana delivers advice that would shape outfit strategy for months. Don't change anything immediately. Keep the old channels, keep the old promises, show continuity. The country needs to believe the deal survived, even if the president didn't. Sinatra asks Giancana about the investigation into the crackdown. Giancana's response is ice cold. Let Hoover handle it. Stay away from the Kennedys. They'll leak whatever damages you. That conversation reveals Giancana's deepest fear, not that Kennedy was ungrateful, that he was betrayed by domestic political operations that had grown beyond any deal's control. Think about that. The man who made JFK president in 1960 believed by 1961 that the presidency had become a threat to the outfit itself. January 25th, Emergency Outfit Summit at a Miami safe house. Giancana arrives at 10:30 a.m. with the official delegation. He sits between Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante, the only 3 bosses who had commanded national operations. They don't speak during the meeting. Afterward, they ride together to a private dinner for damage control. In the limousine, Trafficante breaks the silence. He asks Giancana directly,
"Do you think Bobby acted alone?" Giancana pauses for a long moment. Then he says something Trafficante would repeat to associates before his death. "I think Bobby was exactly what the Kennedys needed, a crusading brother with Senate connections who could be blamed without triggering all-out war." Marcello explodes. He tells Giancana that kind of speculation is dangerous and irresponsible. Giancana responds with barely concealed contempt. "You ran the New Orleans rackets for years, Carlos. You know what they're capable of better than anyone." Marcello goes silent. The limousine reaches the restaurant. They exit without speaking again. FBI files, unsealed in the 1970s, found an entry noting, "Giancana suspects Kennedy betrayal. I pray he's wrong." After the dinner, Giancana attends a private reception at Sinatra's villa. He stays for exactly 30 minutes. Sinatra thanks him for coming. Giancana tells him something witnesses recorded in FBI logs. "Your friend died serving his family. Make sure history remembers that, no matter what else they say about how he won." Sinatra asks Giancana what he means. Giancana doesn't answer. He pats his shoulder and leaves. That cryptic statement would fuel decades of speculation about what Giancana knew and when he knew it. But Giancana wasn't finished. He was about to do something that would link him permanently to Kennedy election conspiracy theories. February 21st, 1961, exactly 1 month after the betrayal. FBI wiretap transcripts detonate like a bomb in intelligence circles. The headline in internal memos reads, "Limit FBI role to intelligence." The source is Sam Giancana. The timing is non-coincidental. Giancana's recorded rage is a 1,200-word indictment of the Kennedys he installed 1 month earlier. He rants, "I never had any thought when I set up the Chicago machine that it would be injected into peacetime political operations." He accuses the administration of conducting covert crackdowns that undermine the outfit's power. He demands the Justice Department be restricted to real crime and stripped of political authority. But here's what makes the timing explosive. Giancana's fury surfaces exactly 30 days after the inauguration, at the moment when Robert Kennedy is forming task forces to investigate the outfit, when questions about Mafia involvement are starting to surface in private memos. Giancana drops a nuclear weapon on the administration's reputation by essentially saying, "I created this president and he's out of control." FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover reads the transcripts and immediately calls Giancana's home in Chicago. Giancana refuses the call. Hoover tries again the next day. Giancana instructs his lieutenant to tell Hoover he has nothing to add beyond what was recorded. Hoover then does something revealing. He orders FBI historians to draft a rebuttal claiming Giancana never meant the rants, that his name was used without permission. The denial falls apart within 48 hours. The transcripts surface in court filings. Giancana confirms to associates he meant every word. He adds one sentence that memos bury on inside pages. "I publish this now because recent events have shown the danger of uncontrolled political operations." Recent events. The betrayal happened 30 days earlier.
By the way, 95% of you watching this aren't subscribed yet. If you've made it this far, you clearly like this content. Click subscribe so YouTube shows you our next video about why Giancana warned JFK about RFK in 1961 and Kennedy ignored him until it was too late. The wiretap transcripts transformed Giancana's relationship with the Kennedy betrayal from passive observer to active participant in the narrative. Conspiracy theorists seize on the timing as proof Giancana knew the Kennedys screwed the outfit. Kennedy defenders claim Giancana was a bitter old mobster settling scores. Neither explanation captures the full truth. Here's what declassified documents from the 1970s revealed. Giancana recorded the rants 6 days after the inauguration. He showed them to Johnny Rosselli and asked whether leaking them would damage Kennedy's presidency. Rosselli advised against it. He warned it would trigger investigations that could paralyze the outfit. Giancana ignored him and let the bugs capture every word. The FBI sat on the transcripts for weeks. Agents debated whether exposing a mob boss's attack on the Kennedys 1 month after inauguration would appear inflammatory. They consulted Justice Department staff. Kennedy told them to keep it quiet. He wanted political cover for any investigation that might implicate the deal. The transcripts gave him that cover. Think about that calculation. Kennedy used Giancana's credibility to create distance between the presidency and the outfit. If investigations discovered Mafia involvement in the election, Kennedy could claim he inherited a rogue operation he didn't control. Giancana was providing political insurance for the new president while settling his own score with the administration he'd created. The official investigations conclude in later years. They conclude the outfit had no role, no deal, no conspiracy. Giancana reads the reports and tells friends they're garbage designed to prevent panic. He never says this publicly, but his 1961 wiretaps remain the permanent record of his suspicion. By 1963, Giancana's heat is intensifying. He's under constant FBI surveillance and largely withdrawn from public operations, but he continues monitoring news about the Kennedy crackdown. When the Justice Department ramps up prosecutions, Giancana's lieutenant Chuck visits him in Chicago. Chuck later told historians that Giancana said something remarkable about the official denials. They're protecting the institution at the expense of truth. That's what governments do when the truth threatens stability. Chuck asked whether Giancana had evidence the Kennedys lied. Giancana's response, "I have years of experience watching politicians lie to protect themselves. That's all the evidence I need." But what Giancana understood better than any other living boss was the institutional pressure to accept the no-deal theory, because the alternative was admitting the outfit had installed a president. That admission would have destroyed public trust in elections, triggered constitutional crisis, and possibly sparked federal war. Giancana believed the truth was being sacrificed to preserve order. Here's the institutional significance Giancana recognized that others missed. He had also installed a president through sudden influence. Kennedy won by the narrowest margin in history. Giancana understood the vulnerability of unexpected power, the chaos, the fear, the opportunity for permanent government to manipulate inexperienced leaders. But there was a crucial difference. When Giancana delivered the presidency in 1960, the outfit controlled the machine. Political operations were scattered across cities and unions. Giancana centralized the effort in 1960 specifically to prevent chaos he feared. By 1961, that centralized power had become the threat he feared most. Giancana's unique perspective as both dealmaker and sudden political kingmaker gave him insights no one else possessed. He knew how political machines exploited transitions. He knew how permanent bureaucracies manipulated inexperienced presidents. He knew how covert operations created plausible deniability for institutional betrayal. And watching Robert Kennedy navigate the exact crisis Giancana had created in 1960, Giancana recognized the pattern. Kennedy inherited incomplete briefings, advisors with divided loyalties, intelligence agencies with their own agendas. The difference was Kennedy inherited them after Giancana had centralized their power. They were far more dangerous in 1961 than they'd been before. Giancana makes one final public statement about the Kennedy betrayal in 1963. He's interviewed by his lawyers for the FBI harassment lawsuit. The lawyer asks Giancana directly whether he believes the Kennedys acted alone. Giancana's response is carefully worded. "I believe the official explanation because the alternative is too dangerous to accept." The lawyer presses him about what alternative he means. Giancana ends the interview. That segment doesn't appear in the court filings. Lawyer notes, later unsealed, reveal Giancana said one more thing off the record. Americans knew what their politicians do in their name. They demand those politicians be abolished. Sometimes ignorance preserves democracy better than truth.
That statement captures Giancana's final position on the Kennedy betrayal. He suspected full double-cross. He believed the truth was being suppressed, but he also believed revealing that truth would destroy the outfit's power more certainly than concealing it. He was trapped between his suspicion and his loyalty to institutional stability. By 1966, Giancana stops discussing the Kennedy betrayal entirely. He's under heavy surveillance and increasingly frail. His last conversation about the deal happens with his daughter in 1967. She asks him one final time whether he thinks the official story told the truth. Giancana's answer, recorded in family accounts, is haunting. I think they told the truth that needed to be told. Whether it's the truth that happened, I'll never know. Sam Giancana is murdered on June 19, 1975, at age 67. In his final years, he never recanted his suspicion of the Kennedys. He never endorsed the official denials. He never stopped believing the presidency involved more than one ungrateful politician. But he also never provided public evidence for his suspicion. Think about that legacy. The man who made JFK president died believing the Kennedys had double-crossed the outfit. The man who secretly installed a president died suspecting his successor inherited a government riddled with betrayal. The man who helped defeat political enemies died fearing democracy's internal enemies were more dangerous than foreign ones. Historians who accessed FBI files under the JFK Records Act in the 1990s discovered something revealing. The FBI maintained a file on Giancana's wiretap rants titled Giancana Attack on Agency. The file contains dozens of documents spanning 1961 to 1975. Every public statement Giancana made about political operations after the betrayal was cataloged, analyzed, and marked for rebuttal. The agency that Giancana helped empower was monitoring him as a threat. Think about that irony. The political machine Giancana built to install Kennedy had turned its tools on the former boss who questioned whether it betrayed him. The FBI never directly confronted Giancana. They just watched him until he died. Giancana's 1961 wiretap rants remain the most controversial thing he ever recorded. FBI historians claim he was misinformed about administration operations. Conspiracy theorists cite them as proof the Kennedys screwed the outfit. The truth is probably simpler. Giancana genuinely feared he'd created an unaccountable power center that threatens the outfit's governance. Whether the Kennedys double-crossed the outfit became less important to Giancana than the fact that they could double-cross the outfit. The administration had the capability, the motive, and the operational security to betray a president-maker and frame it as justice. Whether it actually did so mattered less than the constitutional crisis created by that possibility. Here's what Giancana's response reveals about presidential power. Presidents are temporary. Political machines are permanent. Presidents serve 4 to 8 years. Intelligence directors serve across administrations. Presidents face voters. Political operations face no accountability. Giancana understood that imbalance created systemic vulnerability. The betrayal exposed that vulnerability. A president who threatened to dismantle the outfit was installed by the outfit. His replacement immediately backed away from the promise. The lesson was obvious to anyone paying attention. Challenge the permanent government, and the permanent government removes you. Giancana saw that lesson and tried to warn the outfit through his rants. But Americans weren't ready to hear it. The official denials were more comforting than Giancana's disturbing truth. Better to believe no deal existed than to accept that American political machines installed presidents who threatened their power. Giancana died knowing his warning had been ignored. The most revealing aspect of Giancana's response wasn't what he said publicly, it was what he refused to say. He never explicitly accused the Kennedys of betraying the outfit on record. He never provided evidence for his suspicion. He never testified before congressional committees, despite being the only living boss who understood how political operations worked. That silence was strategic. Giancana believed accusing the Kennedys publicly without proof would trigger constitutional crisis worse than the betrayal itself. So he settled for recorded rants that implied what he couldn't prove. He created a historical record of his suspicion without forcing a confrontation that could destroy the outfit. In the end, Sam Giancana's response to the Kennedy betrayal revealed more about Giancana than about Kennedy. It showed a man who understood institutional power better than any of his successors, a man who recognized he'd created a monster in 1960 that double-crossed its creator in 1961. A man who died believing American democracy's greatest threat wasn't foreign enemies, but domestic political machines. Next video, why Giancana teamed up with the CIA to kill Castro, and how that plot signed his death warrant years later.